Dankjewel, Oleg Fateev. En dat was Dreams, een compositie van hemzelf. We gaan hem nog een paar keer terugzien vanavond op de bayan, de Russische knoppenaccordeon. En we gaan verder doen in het Engels. Ik ben Chris Keulemans and I would like to wish you warm welcome here in the oasis of the short story, presented to us by SLAA, here in the Balie, where we will witness another evening in the already legendary series Hotel van Hassel with our host Sanneke van Hassel, fabulous short story writer herself, and Annelies Verbeke, equally so, who have produced this fascinating collection of short stories from writers all over the world, all of them about cities. And three of these writers are here tonight in this oasis where we will find the drinks and the food and the sofas and the bookshop behind me, the Evenaar, who is here to sell you the books, which is obligatory, by the way, so don't exit the room before you buy them. And the authors are here to sign copies of their books if you would like to speak to them afterwards. Now, tonight we will be hearing 3 writers from Naar, stad, the great book. 3 of their stories are also published for you in the little booklet you found on your seats. They are A.L. Kennedy, David Al-Bahari, and Mehmet Zaman Sachiolu. One by one they will read one of their stories. On this long piece of paper you will see the translation, and afterwards I will talk with them shortly about their work, about their themes, about short stories, about cities. All has been done to bring us together tonight in Hotel van Hassel for the love of the short story. So, it's my pleasure to ask Annelies Verbeke and Sanneke van Hassel to take a seat on this beautiful sofa here to tell us what it's about. This whole thing in English, so our guests from abroad will also be able to understand us. Annelies, striking, of course, that you collect short stories from all over the world and then choose to focus on the city as the theme throughout the book. Why was that?
Oh, well, actually, this is a question for Sanneke, okay. Because it was her idea. But yeah, I immediately thought it to be a good idea because it's a very 21st century theme. As we say in the introduction as well, more and more people live in cities, and this will continue in the future. So at the moment, more people live in cities than elsewhere, and yes, well, we wanted to use the city not in a very strict way as, well, to talk about going to the city, but migration became a theme through this theme, and sometimes the city is just the background, sometimes it's an enemy, sometimes it's a friend, and well, it turned out to be a very good theme, actually. Yeah.
Sanneke, what is the, how do you say, what do cities and short stories share in their nature?
Now immediately I think about all those stories that don't take place in cities. But for example, Alice Munro we couldn't include in this collection. But I think it has, for me, I think I live in Rotterdam and that city changes the whole time. If I haven't been to the station, for example, for a week, it looks completely different. So, yeah, this sort of fleetingness, but on the other hand, city tells you a lot about, if you look at the city, about what's on people's mind at a certain moment. Where are they all sitting at that hip coffee bar, or what is that little group over there? So city is also a mirror of the people, in a way, I think.
You could say, I mean, more simple people than you would say, okay, city life is quick and fast, there's no concentration, so the short story is the best possible.
Yeah, but short story is about concentration, I think.
Exactly.
So, because it's sort of a lot of stripped off, and you go to sort of essence, and also a reader that asks that you really read every phrase, and every phrase is important. Now, of course, maybe in a good novel it is like that too, but it works differently, I think. The way a short story writer works is most of the time also really on every phrase, and you can rework it a lot. I think it's easier to rework a story 400 times than a novel, for example.
Annelies?
And also, yes, it's also the genre itself. I mean, you can write a short story about just taking a train in a station in a certain city. I mean, probably you could write a novel about it, but it would be much more difficult. So it can be a very small part of a city as well, which shows a lot about that city. And this is the good form of that, I think.
It was published a few months ago. In the meantime, you've been receiving responses from readers. How do people enter the universe of the city short story?
Well, the funny thing is that we thought quite long about a good, which story should follow up which one, and we thought about, yes, there has to be a lot of difference between one and the other, and then this and not that, but then people read it in their own way. They want to make their own trip, which is actually great. So I heard people saying, I did Europe, now I'm going for Africa, and I think it's great, because I mean we are showing them around the world, and they are doing it in any way they please. Yeah.
But they always say that it goes. They cannot read more than 2 or 3 stories a day.
True, because of the concentration.
Yeah, because there's so much in every story.
Exactly.
And also with the editor, they said, "Yeah, we will read this book in a week." And then after, it's not possible. We need more time.
Returning to the order, you chose to put Mehmet Zaman book story, The Intersection, at the very beginning of the book. Why was that?
For several reasons.
We're going to hear the story later
Istanbul
tonight.
is, I think, one of the... this is a city that has been growing so fast, and it is an example of... You also have those kind of cities, for example, in Africa, Lagos, and in China, but one of those modern cities who have this old core, but now sort of expand and expand and expand. And then probably the story is called The Intersection, and it takes place at an intersection, at a kruispunt. I like to start a book at the intersection, so it's also the image of the intersection. Yeah. And it's also about modern confusal immediately. There's a lot of confusion, I must say confusion in the story. So that was also, I like it's good to start with a lot of confusion. But then also it's one of the few stories which is sort of hopeful. So then we have had that, and then we can go to all
it's
the
all downhill from there, that's true. But it's a wonderful story. Mehmet Zaman will read after the break. We're very happy to have you and your wife here with us tonight, and you will discover why it's such an excellent story to begin the book with. Annelies, the other 2 writers here tonight, A.L. Kennedy and David Al-Bahari, why did you choose to include them in the book as well?
Well, that's obvious, because they are very good writers, and writers who also choose the short story as a form very consciously, I think.
Can you tell us more specifically about either one of them, why you love his or her work so much?
By David Al-Bahari, I just actually read his 2 short novels, which are also really great novels, and I love them. But why? Yes, it's always hard to explain why you like something, because it's good, and why it's good. It's so hard. I mean,
I think it deserves, and you're very capable.
No, I'm not.
A deeper explanation.
Because it learns you things about, and that's also for A.L. Kennedy's stories. It teaches me stuff about life, or it shows me things that I knew were there, but hadn't explained myself so clearly. This is one reason. And then the style with both is just extraordinary, I think.
Al-Bahari, what I think is very special is that it's always a lot about estrangement, or it's sort of, how do you say, voorbeeldig. Exemplary, the 21st or 20th century estrangement. It's always, I mean, I'm sitting here now, but it's often you have these thoughts, what am I doing here? Who am I? And in his stories, people are literally just dropped in a city, but I get that feeling every day when I go to the baker here. But this feeling of estrangement, and that people have, I think, a lot because everything's going so fast, and all those kind of modern what is I think also the theme of modern literature with his stories are great if it's about that theme. Yeah.
And with both, I think that they are not trying to cover up the fact that things can go quite brutal, but at the same time there is a lot of tenderness, and I like stuff that does not, where one does not exclude the other, where you have the feeling that it all exists at the same time.
The concentration, the estrangement of the city life, the brutality and the tenderness between human beings. I think that connects a lot of the stories in the book, and certainly the stories and the writers will see tonight. Thank you for now.
Okay.
Het boek maar laten liggen.
Annelies Verbeke en Sanneke van Hassel. Who here actually possesses the book already, Naar, stad? Even in the dark, that looks like a tiny minority. So it's on sale for here. It's the cheapest world city trip you can imagine, and it's even better than whatever physical trip you would take, so I can really recommend the book. For instance, because A.L. Kennedy is in it, and A.L. Kennedy, many of us might know because both in English but also fortunately in Dutch she has published novels, short stories, non-fiction. Tonight we'll focus on the short stories. She is an associate professor of creative writing at the University of Warwick. She lives in Glasgow. I think that's Glasgow. Every year she moves temporarily to Edinburgh, where she is well acclaimed as a stand-up comedian during the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She writes for radio, both BBC, Radio 4, but also recently for the Südwestrundfunk in Germany. She has a blog at The Guardian, which is a joy to read, and check out her website, A.L. Kennedy. And then immediately go to the frequently asked questions. I can tell you, if you read that without smiling, you're a dead person. She has published 6 collections of short stories. The most recent ones are Indelible Acts and What Becomes. Wonderful collections, also on sale here, but tonight she'll read for us a story that has not been published yet. A.L. Kennedy.
Oh, I'm too small. Small Scottish person. There we go. Tiny. Hello. Yeah, very nice to be here. Very nice to be asked to be here. Lovely to be with David and Mehmet. Great honour. And thank you for coming out in such a non-typical day in Amsterdam. Because in September it would normally be sunny and there would be flamingos in the canals. I know this. I was told. So well done. It's like being back at home. You'll have noticed Glasgow turned into London. I betrayed my country and I'm not allowed back because I'm trying to move to the capital of England. Boo. But English lawyers are preventing me. They're not the same as Scottish lawyers. They are very evil and wrong. Yeah, there we go. I don't have to stand on tiptoe. That's good. So I've taken these off so that I can't see. Well, it's not so that I can't see you. I can see you more, but you're kind of. It means I can read. So don't let me forget them. Okay. This is called This Man. I'm reading it because it's a little bit newer than the previous one. Really. Feel free. It's a very Scottish evening. Everything lovely is behind me. And you can't get it. There's the food and the tea and the alcohol and the lovely sofa and the books by everybody on earth, and you can't have any of that. You just have to sit here and listen to me. It's great. But if you do get hungry or anything, because I do stand up, I don't mind if you want to wander around, you know. But it might be a health and safety issue because you could fall down. It should be very unfortunate. So this is called This Man, and we're going to talk about it, so I won't say anything. And it is a short story, so Hopefully the beginning and the middle and the end are all in the same place. If you find yourself explaining your story before it starts, it's a very bad sign. It means you haven't put it in the story. So, this man. There's this man and he's telling you a story. Only he's not. You're sitting together on uneasy, weatherproof chairs. He's dragged both of them out here to benefit from the sun, hauled out the table too, and nobody from the cafe made any objections. He seemed authoritative when he said, "First good day of the year. How lovely." And he left a pause beyond lovely during which he did not look at you. Although you were also not looking at him, you had a clear sense of his not looking. You could feel it. If he'd asked you what it was like, you could have told him, it's like a mild ache or some odd colour in the fall of light. He didn't, of course, ask. You didn't, of course, tell him. But you were paying attention. You still are. He then added, "Good," rather quietly, and with a kind of helplessness, after which he'd rallied and repositioned the seats. Something about his movements during these proceedings had suggested a happy certainty. There might be many other areas of doubt, but here he was sure sitting face to face wasn't going to work. And anyone would advise that side by side was a touch eccentric, if not reminiscent of pensioners waiting to die on a seaside bench. The type local councils fix near pleasant views to memorialise other pensioners who once also liked to sit near pleasant views. You can imagine, are unable not to, a future within which you might lean against him as you consider your arthritis or his replacement hip, and how the wind would ruffle what's left of anything and make you love him all the more while he loves you back to a comparable degree. Or maybe you just eat sandwiches in a bitter and familiar pause and then go home to hate each other for another decade. It's not uncommon. Which is inappropriate. You're on a first date. Why picture the brownish parka in which you apparently think he'll take decrepit holidays? Why conjure up domestic horrors and spats over too much pickle that will have dampened the nasty bread? Why assume you'll have nasty bread? It's not that you believe this nonsense. I can't abide pickle, I've told you, and that bread's nasty. Where's my pills? It's more that you'd rather anticipate fictional disasters than deal with your awareness of how many true things can go wrong. They'll bury you in that parka. I'd like to see them try. This man isn't a pensioner or in a parka. He dresses nicely, like a person who understands his own shape. You appreciate it without looking much. And he'd understood the shape he required from his surroundings before he'd finally let you sit. He'd needed the chairs at 90 degrees to each other, enough to keep you close across one corner of the table, but not too close. He hadn't wanted you too close. So maybe you'd made him ambivalent from the beginning. Or maybe your date is evasive. Or else considerate, shy, romantic, a tease, anal, retentive, insanely controlling, or otherwise strange. Your mind kicks and shies through a range of distracting suggestions. He might be someone who's used to cramped tables, possibly keen on camper vans, works in a cubicle, poker player in miniature casinos, brought up on boats, lives in a shed. None of this is true. But equally, you don't much know what is. You do not know him, this man. He is practically a stranger. And you can't think why he chose to see you here, at a concrete theatre complex with an equally concrete cafe and this concrete square baking airlessly in front where there is no one but this man and you. The other exterior tables and wiser diners and unadjusted chairs are over by the building. They nestle in its shadows, are thickest towards the angle where two wings meet. 90 degrees again. 490 degrees, to be technical. You're in a square. it's square. Perhaps he has a thing for corners. Or else he likes display. You do feel that you have been forced to become one half of an event. Inside the cafe, people are eating ahead of a matinee performance, grabbing a coffee, studying their programs, chatting in a manner that suggests they have made good choices in life and are about to savor something enriching and not to just everyone's taste. Outside, there's you and this man and what amounts to an audience. Every now and then someone lifts their head in the shade, stops talking, glances over and sees this couple meeting, this couple having lunch, this man telling this woman a story. Only he's not. He isn't really saying anything. He began with a stutter and falter of, "Sorry, excuse me, I'll just, hang on." And there was the minor chaos you guessed that he always draws up and around him, the furniture moving and the scamper back and forth as he fetched superfluous napkins, another spoon, the glass for your apple juice, a glass of ice for the glass for your apple juice, some pepper in a handful of sachets which remain untouched. Then he sat, swallowed audibly, and began running off through longer and longer sentences, looping them forward while he showed you the flinch of his hands, the over-vigorous illustration of salient and mildly amusing points. All his details blur and fade, though. He reaches no conclusions. He tangles and frequently breaks his own thread, and you feel that his general rush of words amounts to a hedge, a fence, energetic smoke. They are the cover that he ducks behind. He was the one who asked to meet you, but now he's in hiding. He's even crouching to a tiny degree, shoulders tensed, as he tells you the first coat he bought that was properly expensive had actually been a knockoff with fraudulent seams that unraveled, and he's also bought a second-hand stove that harbored almost fatal electrical flaws. You had not expressed an interest in fashion, or stoves, or very unwise decisions. Before this, he half finished an anecdote about cats, which seemed intended to be funny, but wasn't. Perhaps if he'd made it to the end. His being so far away and yet here makes you lonely. You stare at your lasagna, which is ugly and has congealing historical layers like a starchy lump of cliff. Not something you can eat. There is a plate of allegedly Moroccan casserole in front of him. It hasn't been attempted. This isn't having lunch with him. This is visiting lunch with him. You should have brought your own food to ignore. Bad cheese and wet pickle, nasty bread. It would have been cheaper. I hate pickle. Well, I didn't know that. Well, I've been telling you for 37 years. Starters you'd rather not have to continue. You remember arriving early. The more important the occasion, the earlier you'll be, and then having to wander, wait, lean against the warmed bulk of the embankment wall. It felt good, reliable, relaxing. Not like this. You looked down at the retreated tide and the narrow drifts of dirty sand it had abandoned. They made you think, this lets it seem that somewhere underneath the grey and the burden of straight edges, unnatural angles, London could still be a living thing and might simply shrug one random morning and crack its surfaces and let fundamental elements, sand, rock, water, run loose. Which might just have been something to consider rather than considering this man and your imminent meeting, or it might have been caused by the slowed and silvered air and the city being briefly turned to silhouettes, lacework and bright prospects. There was a sweetness when you breathed, as if leaves were waking somewhere out of sight. You were happy, unmistakably. You didn't quite believe that you were happy because of him, but could have been persuaded. Then he arrived. Quick and with a slight flail in his limbs, a vaguely tangential approach, and his nervousness made you nervous as if he had identified a threat you couldn't place. No worse now, your nerves, because you are so firmly by yourself. Still, he would do you no harm. You can tell. This is rare in men. and in people. It is therefore attractive, and it makes you miss him. You allow yourself, I miss him. And you watch the side of his face as he laments the failures of professional carers and dentists in particular. His own glass of apple juice is raised, but he does no more than peer at it for an instant and put it down, being unable to either halt or drink. Apart from your bottle of apple juice, you've got water and a pot of tea. You have to suppose you expect it to be thirsty. And then there's the glass of melting ice. You're not thirsty. You pour out some juice and add ice cube by cube so slowly that it hurts your fingertips. It may be that you miss him less and are at the edge of being bored. You pour out some tea. Add ice to that. He forgot to bring milk, and so did you. No way you're going to mention it now and send him herring off again. You'll have your tea iced and wish for lemon, but not ask for that either. You're not exactly listening anymore. His throat, his neck, you want to touch them with the chill of your fingers. Find out if they're as soft and private as they seem, as delicate. The sudden necessity of this prickles in your hands, it nags, and you're no longer bored. It could be that you're irritated. You don't know. Then his knee, dunt, politely, dunt, rests for a breath against yours, dunt, withdraws, dunt, returns and stays, grazes up and then down and then stays with a pressure which is nearly an absence and therefore aches. He is still talking, still focused beyond your right shoulder, with you. You do not move. You are, the concrete around you, visibly in tiny motion, every surface changing beneath the heat, with him. He is with you. You are with him. At least this could be the case. He is describing his mother. His mother up a set of steps and being scared to change a light bulb, that reaching up, angled head and unsteady hands, lifted eyes, the risk of a fall in return for illumination. He makes it real. He takes away his knee. Whatever he's recalling makes him sad, and his eyes, when they find yours, are fast and open and right here and have a shine of pain in them and a deeper intention you can't grasp before it goes. And now it's all silent. Miles off, years off. It could be that you can hear other voices, meaningless voices, and the stir of the city and an aircraft hanging in the distance. This doesn't matter. The silence continues. You have no idea what to do. He nods. He sips his apple juice. His eyes become ordinary and cautious before they refocus beyond you. Softly, he describes a trip to Dublin, and you reach your fingers as far as his arm and you touch it when you hadn't anticipated that you would. To be accurate, you don't notice that you've moved until the cloth of his jacket is warm against you, those 1, 2, 3, 4 and the thumb little areas of you. At the same time, you realize you're not being comforting because you're too late. Your gesture will seem like an unwilling afterthought. He sort of turned to you, tried you, was possibly upset, possibly about his mother, and you've demonstrated how you won't support him, won't help until he doesn't need it. You've made a mistake. Not a big one. But personal situations like this, slightly undefended, barely begun, are fragile, and it seems he is quite unforgiving because after you withdraw your hand, his shoulders drop and the Dublin excursion ends with, anyway, where was I? Something about him seems to have given up. He prods the casserole with his spoon. He no longer appears to be nervous, simply dismayed by unappealing food. While he makes himself eat, you hammer together remarks on the day and the river, let them go at intervals, and rearrange areas of your lasagna. You remove its corners, but that only makes more. If an observer were to glance over here again, they would see acquaintances at lunch, acquaintances in the same place, the mutually restless gestures that suggest both parties will finish shortly and go away. Which is all right, really. It is. You don't absolutely need another friend. He would be fine in that capacity. You could be content with that, probably. An occasional coffee. It's been really wonderful up to this point. It might get terribly bad now, but it was wonderful up, wasn't it? It was great. They were crying. And one of them was deaf, and now they're not. It's amazing. Do you want to have a seat, or do you want to just stand there?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, it's cool. It's fine. Yeah. Round of applause for the late people. Hey. Okay, you didn't get a very good round of applause. That's. Here we go. We're back with the lasagna. You remove its corners, but that only makes more. If an observer were to glance over here again, they would see acquaintances at lunch, acquaintances in the same place, the mutually restless gestures that suggest both parties will flinch shortly and go away, which is all right. Really, it is. You don't absolutely need another friend, but he would be fine in that capacity. You could be content with that, probably. An occasional coffee, no more lunches, could happen. Without the anxiety over whether you seem presentable or sensible or amusing or lovable or repeatable or anyone significant, you could enjoy yourself. You could chat. Or else you could not chat, as it turns out, because although you can feel yourself sinking into friendship, there is currently no conversation. This man is staring mutely towards the wide brightness of the water and the further shore, and you aren't inclined to interrupt him. It seems there is nothing you can offer to beat the view. Under other circumstances, you might suggest fetching desserts or getting more drinks, the ones you have being too cold, too hot, too unalcoholic, too incorrect. But you'd basically rather not, because it's obvious he'll make his excuses and refuse you. Having worked this through in your mind and therefore avoided being humiliated, you somehow already are. You suspect you may have to be angry with him soon as a matter of sheer self-defense. And meanwhile, there's no hesitancy left to prevent you from facing him, shifting your chair from its perfect location. You regret this, but he doesn't notice, and truly seeing him. Whatever could have been between you is gone and done, but nevertheless you study him, what he is, this man. And he is completely at rest, and so it's plain, this truth you didn't find but should have. He is beautiful. Sometimes he can't hide it. And this information repositions everything. Dunt. The chairs, table, concrete, city, river, sky, and makes them expressions of emptiness. So, he stretches, rubs his hand at the back of his neck and frowns. Yes, gives you a bland smile. Time to go, I think. I think time to go. After which he stands, and you stand with him. And there is a point at the embankment. It arrives with immense rapidity where he must head left for his car and you must head right for the underground or for a walk across the bridge or else a longer journey to exhaust yourself. Break up through Westminster and into Soho or else aim for Chelsea, for the world's end and keep on going until it's dark and you are lost. You are very tired of being disappointed. You'll get over it. Be cheerier tomorrow. But standing in the sunlight with this man, you're not over it yet. You haven't taken his hand because the idea of shaking it goodbye makes you too sad. And here are his shoes. You are evidently staring at his shoes. They are quite ugly, like you. Okay. This man who is not telling you a story. Okay. But repeating one word for no particular reason. Okay. Until he leans down and you can't help but look. It is natural to look, and he's here and increasingly close, and then brings you a kiss. This kiss. He kisses with a pressure which is nearly an absence and therefore aches. You kiss him back. You do not kiss as if you are friends. You do not kiss as if you are acquaintances. You kiss, both of you, back and soft and back and soft and back. You kiss each other back. This kiss. You do not know him, this man. He is practically a stranger. Only he's not.
Thank you for that, Alison. This was an unpublished story, and behind you, you're apparently still working on it, because behind you every now and then, especially in the final lines, there were slight differences between what we read and what you were reading.
Yeah, I'm always working.
In general, I thought this was a great example of what Sanneke and Annelies were talking about earlier, where in a great short story, every line is right. It's almost there.
Except for the ones I changed, obviously. Set the wrong file. Oh dear, that's very bad.
We're in the laboratory of the short story, so that's fine. It was also wonderful to hear you read out loud, because reading you on paper, to me at least, the uneasiness of daily life among us human beings prevails, while when you read there is also the comical note and the melody.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, life is uneasy, but if you take it seriously, then it would be unbearable. They have this saying in Berlin, die Lage ist hoffnungslose, aber nicht ernst. The situation is hopeless but not serious. Which I think is...
that would summarize a lot of your stories. Now,
and life, it's not my fault, you know.
Now, where do these terribly awkward images of yours come from? Let's say at the very beginning of this story, still everything is more or less okay and insecure, and then you suddenly say, and anyone would have advised that side by side was a touch eccentric, if not reminiscent of pensioners waiting to die on a seaside bench.
I don't think I'm complete. I might be, but I don't think I'm completely alone. First date, were you all completely happy or confident?
Yeah, on a first date, how many of you thought you were already pensioners waiting to die on a seaside bench?
Well, you know, there's a grey area in between thinking that you're gorgeous and imagining yourself as a pensioner. Yeah. I think, you know, it's a way that your head can go when you're trying not to think about something, like how terrible it is. Yeah, I mean, I like awkward situations because they're interesting, because you feel that you're alive. It's not bland, but it is slightly horrendous as well. But they're interesting. If it was the fifth date and they were just going to go to bed and, you know... Nobody wants that, really. It's like, you know, all the great books that people like and the great movies that people like. You know, the protagonist, you know, if it's a child, their parents have died, and their brothers and sisters have died, or they're all in prison. If it's a grown-up book, they're married, but the marriage isn't happy, or they had a partner, but they died. You know, as readers, I think we're quite greedy. We kind of want them to only have us, and we also want them to not to have worse lives than ours. But you know, happiness isn't that interesting.
Where does a story like this start?
Oh, I don't know. I know less and less as I get older and older, literally. But I think I used to pretend I could tell you an answer to that. And now I've stopped pretending I know what I'm doing. I think any individual writer gets used to how your mind works, and you get used to the bits of an idea that belong together. Because they all taste the same, or smell the same, or belong in the same place. And then you get enough of them for it to be a critical mass, and then it becomes a story, hopefully, or it just goes, and then it's not a story. That's a bad thing. But I do. A friend of mine was slightly making fun of sort of. Oh, he was kind of pretending to describe a sort of type of American present tense kind of story. So I thought I would write him a sort of pretend American present tense story. Vaguely, that was part of it. But I have no idea. Things arrive. Short stories. They are technically more demanding than novels because there's less room and they're short.
Like there was this line in the middle of this story, this isn't having lunch with him, this is visiting lunch with him.
Well, yeah.
Was that an image that was at the beginning of what you were imagining when writing this story?
No, that was just because obviously they weren't going to be able to eat. I've never understood going to eat something with somebody that you're in love with. Because again, I don't think it's that uncommon that if you really like somebody, you just don't want to eat. You don't. It's the last thing you want to do is fill up on potatoes and fall over. So you sit there and he's thinking, God, you're an anorexic. I've got some kind of crazy woman here. She doesn't eat food. And meanwhile, he's chasing his stuff around. It's not, But if you're both there going, oh, fantastic, it means they don't fancy you. They're just thinking, hey, food. When you've been married for 400 years, I don't know about that. Yeah, then you would eat. Otherwise, you'd be dead, obviously. If you really, really, really loved each other forever, Anna Karenina, it wouldn't have been a problem. They both have been dead if they still loved each other. I think this could be wrong. I'm not very good at relationships, but I think they involve eating somewhere else.
Okay, so
if I'm going on a date, I always have a lot to eat beforehand. So I won't get annoyed.
I wasn't expecting actually kind of, how do you say, marriage therapy handbook night.
God for that.
But thanks. It's useful for the next time. On the other hand, let's say counterbalancing this awkwardness, this uneasiness. Sometimes in your story you almost offhandedly throw in these fantastically beautiful sentences about cities, like this one. Or it might have been caused by the slow then silvered air and the city being briefly turned to silhouettes, lacework and bright prospects. There was a sweetness when you breathed, as if leaves were waking somewhere out of sight. Can you tell us about that? What are you offering yourself and us here, and maybe even your characters as a counterbalance?
Well, you've got a problem. I mean, if you, I always, this will look as if I've only just made it up, but I always do. If you can lend me, have you got an empty glass, not an empty one?
It's almost empty.
That's good. Yeah, there we go. Because the thing about a short story, it's very hard to tell people what a short story is like, because they're little. They sort of have to resonate out with themselves and within themselves. So they need to be as close to perfect as possible, so that they can go, and rings, but with a wine glass. They have to, in order to be able to get any kind of sound out of them that goes beyond them, they have to be close to perfect. Otherwise, it's just funk. So you're trying to do that. So there are bits where I think there's certainly a temptation to kind of do some writing. Obviously, you can't be very poetic if your principal character isn't that poetic, and who the hell is all the time. So it can't be purple. And part of the drive is just to be factual. She's kind of transferring her affection for somebody into liking London, which is quite difficult because it's a filthy, horrible, soul-destroying, grinding, brain-eating vat of hell, which is why I'm moving there. Because I want to suffer. But it can, I think because of that, because it's so incredibly ugly, it's also very, very beautiful if you catch it out of the side of your eye. And the river, it's very hard to make a river horrendously ugly. And although the Thames tries. But there are In the spring and the autumn, particularly, London can be very beautiful. It can get the right colour of sky and everything. And so partly you're trying to be, that's sort of factually a time when I've seen London being very lovely. It's a good... I don't always set things geographically in accurate places, but
these moments, these city environments and its occasional beauty are useful when you need the story to resonate.
Well, and you always do. That's the thing. It always has to resonate. But there's an interaction. The other guys could talk about this better than me, but there's... If it's third person, if it's he, she, and it's very far away and omniscient, there isn't that much of a link between the characters necessarily and the sort of tone of the overall story and the tone of the descriptions and the tone of the metaphors and yada, yada, yada. But my stuff, and short stories generally quite often are close third, where it's he, she, but you really mean that guy. So it gets coloured by their psychology, and their psychology in return will colour the metaphors and how literary you can be or not literary you can be, or it gets flavoured with them, or you can be first person, it's very flavoured with them. So everything interacts all the time. It's quite difficult to... I sometimes deal with students and you're sort of saying, well, okay, you're basically doing 9 things at once, so get over it. The good thing is that you can rewrite until you get all 9 of them right. It's not like you're having to go immediately, because that would be intolerable. But you're trying to get everything right. And cities are great for that, because they're full of contrast. You can just you can be in this street and it's horrendous, and you can be in that street and it's beautiful, and this is kind of weird, and that bit's you haven't been down there yet.
It's almost like a short story.
Yeah. My answers are never long. Answers are always longer than the stories. I don't know. But I've spoken to lots of writers. Because it's a job that nobody sees you doing, because it's an interior process. It's not like a dancer. You can watch a dancer dancing and think, wow, that's really good. A very good dancer, they leap and then they kind of float for a little bit, and you go, oh, they're good, and then they go, boom. Bad dancer, they just go, whoop, up. It's that bit. It's like, ooh, Nijinsky. They do supernatural things, and it's there, and there they are being supernatural. I think partly because writing isn't like that. It's quite difficult. It's not just me. I've spoken to other writers.
Just now we saw
to define yourself as a writer, to feel that it's believable. So it's quite difficult to describe the process, because you're always thinking maybe this isn't how anybody else does it. I don't know, because it's internal.
It seemed in this story like at a certain moment you almost defined yourself as a writer when you wrote. It's more that you'd rather anticipate fictional disasters than deal with your awareness of how many true things can go wrong.
Yeah. There's two. Well, I mean, I think it applies to her, because that's why she's thinking in great big loops. The inside of my head, it's fantastically better to not be inside my head, clearly. There's something about writing, it's quite meditative. It's a very beautiful thing to do, because the interior monologue, which is I have to pay the gas bill and I need to go shopping and I wonder if he still loves me, and that stops, and you get another interior monologue, which is harder work, but it's less familiar because you're being allowed to be somebody else, which is miraculous because it's not possible. So it's kind of beautiful, and it's like having a very long mantra. Or sometimes it's exactly like having a mantra, because you can't get those 4 words right, so you just say them over and over and over again until you can change them to 4 other words that are better. And then you do that until you get the 4 correct words. But it's a way of being away from anxieties, I think. It's a good thing. Yeah, it's just generally it's a very beautiful thing to do, and I think the fact that a writer generally is doing something that they love and makes them happy, even if they're writing something quite dark. I think it's why dictators and politicians hate writers, because the readers pick up on what the writer has, which is, I can be anybody. I can go anywhere. I can be at any time. I can be a time that never was. I can do things that I can't do. And you come with me. And you do all these impossible things. So you're practicing doing impossible things. Or possible things, but you haven't done them yet. So you're practicing change. So obviously, politicians hate that. They want you to practice being the same, not thinking about it, and letting them do what they want, and give money to the banks. You know, that's it's very, very, very free, beautiful thing to do. It's a privilege to do it. You know, there's days when it feels a bit grueling and lonely, but largely not. It's a very lovely thing to do, and then you get paid for it. You know. I think stuff and I make a living by forcing you to think it again in my absence. That's just weird. But it's you know, I know as a reader that I love doing that. Otherwise I can't be other people. You know, I love, I went with a bunch of writers, for example, to St. Petersburg. And we'd all read so much about St. Petersburg. We'd already been in St. Petersburg. So it was kind of like being in a wonderful new place, but it was also, wow, we're all back in St. Petersburg. Except we know it in the 1930s, and the 1920s, and the 1950s, and the 1890s, and we've all been here far longer than we could ever have lived. Hello, this is great. So that kind of thing is, it's great. What happens in reality is very small, really. It's what happens out of reality that's the good stuff sometimes.
Alison, thank you so much. I know there's students of creative writing here. I know there's other writers here. Thanks for this.
I'm sorry, I'm wrong. It's all wrong.
No.
It's all wrong. Don't pay any attention. Even I can make a living out of writing, and look how terribly badly I do. It's hope for the future.
Thanks for this, let's say, this view of the inner Nijinsky of the short story writer. Thank you so much. May I ask Oleg Fateev to play us another piece of his music? Thank you again, Oleg. This was Oceaan, yeah? Yeah, from the composition from the theater production Branden, acclaimed production by director Alice Zandwijk last year. Oleg has also written, for instance, the music for the extraordinary As I Left My Father's House by Bright Richards, touring across mosques and churches all over the country. And on the 3rd of October at midnight in the Utrecht Schouwburg, Oleg will perform with Jeroen Willems in a reconstruction of the legendary Jacques Brel concert. So that's something to look forward to. Now, the next writer before the break is David Albahari, and I'm really proud to have David Albahari here. He lives and works in Calgary, Canada. He is a Serbian writer of Jewish origin. He moved to Canada in '94 when the wars were raging across former Yugoslavia. Before and after, he's been publishing novels and short stories, and he's an active translator of English literature to Serbian. He has produced 9 collections of short stories, next to 11 novels. A few of his books are fortunately translated and published into Dutch by uitgeverij Cossé, and also to find here. Now I would like to ask David Albahari on the stage.
Thank you. First I have to correct some numbers. It's 30 novels now and 12 collections of short stories. I mean, the winters are long in Calgary, so there's nothing much to do unless you're interested in trying to find where the bears sleep during the winter. So I'll read a story which was written as a sort of sign of appreciation to what Isaac Bashevis Singer meant to me as a writer. And this story is called Hitler u Čikagu. Uvek sam zavidio putnicima koji uživaju u vožnji avionom. Svet je za njih poput pegave kruške koju treba što pre obleteti. Možda tako i treba da bude. U dobu u kojem živimo i koje prezire sporost, avioni nisu luksuz, već sredstvo kojim se potvrđuje pripadanje sadašnjosti i kojim se šta više može ukrasti nekoliko sati od vlastite prošlosti ili budućnosti. To je magija koja se teško odoleva. Ja je odolevam već mnogo godina. Uopšte mi ne bi smetalo, zapravo najviše bih se radovao kada bih i dalje mogao da putujem kočijama. Svet, međutim, nema više vremena za konjski kas, čak ni za galop. I stoga, ma koliko se brani od čarolija brzine, smerno ulazim u avion i pokorno slušam zapovesti stjuardesa. Vezujem se, proveravam pojas za spasavanje i pregradu odakle će ako zatreba iskočiti maska s kiseonikom, potom pratim pogledom fluorescentnu traku koja će me u slučaju prinudnog spuštanja odvesti do najbližeg izlaza. Onda stavljam slušalice, nalazim kanal sa džez muzikom, otvaram knjigu i trudim se da što pre utonem u san. Tako sam uradio i ovog puta, na početku leta za Ameriku. Vraćao sam se iz Evrope sa sastanka pisaca iz bivše Jugoslavije, koji je prema zamisli fondacije koja je organizovala skup trebalo da otvori prolaz za novo razumevanje, a samo je ponovo iznova nam videlo stare razlike. Ne znam zašto sam očekivao nešto drugo. Umesto radošću ispunio me gorčinom i ona se polako, ali pouzdano dok je avion hvatao zalet, pretvarala u mučninu koja nikakva pilula nije mogla da ublaži. Ništa mi nije preostalo nego da žmurim tokom iskušenog uspinjanja i da se kasnije, kada se avion našao na određenoj visini, zagnjurim u nove svetove. Poneo sam za to putovanje jednu od knjiga Isaka Baševisa Singera, džepno izdanje na engleskom romana Neprijatelji, ljubavna priča. Neko bi mogao da pomislio sam da je taj izvor bio povezan sa razlogom moje posete Evropi, da se u tom na izgled paradoksalnom spoju mržnje i ljubavi krio ključ za objašnjenje onoga oko čega pisci nisu uspeli da se slože. Istina je bila drugačija. U avionima, naime, nisam mogao da čitam postmoderniste. Razdraživale su me njihove fragmentarne strukture, a iščašene pripovedačke strategije uvećavale su moj strah od letenja. Klasične prozne forme, poput Singerovih, smirivale su me, uvlačile u svoju privrednu stvarnost i činile da zaboravim da se doista nalazim. Onda sam zaspao. Probudio sam se u trenutku kada se žena sa susednog sedišta saginjala da podigne knjigu koja mi je skliznula s krila. Hrapavi muški glas pevuše negde duboko u mojim ušima da se noć neće nikada završiti, iako je svuda oko nas, lepo se to videlo kroz prozorčiće aviona vladao dan. Žena se okrenula prema meni i pokazala mi knjigu. Žućkaste pege na njenom licu, vratu i nadlanicama kazivale su da se odavno navikla na starost. Skinuo sam slušalice. Singer, rekla je kao da to nisam znao. Divan pisac. Da li vam je poznata na njegova priča o tome kako je video Hitlera u centru Njujorka? Da, rekao sam. Usta su mi bila suva. Provela sam jednu noć sa njim. Sa Hitlerom? Ne, rekla je, tako nešto ne bih sebi dozvolila, mislim na Singera. Ćutao sam, šta sam mogao da kažem. Znam šta mislite, rekla je žena i pružila mi knjigu, ali ništa od toga nije se desilo. Tada sam predavala na jednom od univerziteta u Viskonsinu i Singer je došao da drži predavanje o jidiš književnosti. Prišla sam mu i rekla da sam doživela nešto neobično, da sam naime sigurna da sam jednom videla Hitlera u Čikagu. Zainteresovao se i pozvao me da ga posle večere sa šefom katedre, koji je morao da prisustvuje, posjetim u njegovoj hotelskoj sobi. Otišla sam, zašto da ne odem? Sačekao me u odelu, čak ni kravatu nije skinuo, jedino na nogama imao meke kožne papuče. Nije podnosio, kazao da ga cipele stiskaju. Pažljivo me je slušao, klimao glavom, hrabrio me da nastojim. Govorio je da je svet pun privida, ali da nikada ne znamo koji od njih je istinit. Ništa nije samo dobro ili zlo, mudro ili glupo, veselo ili tužno, i uvek postoji mogućnost da se jedno preobrati u drugo. Pričao mi je kako se u svom životu kretao od jedne do druge krajnosti i kako nikada nije siguran kada je budan, a kada sanja. I šta dalje da vam pričam? Reč po reč dočekali smo zoru. On se i dalje smešio, ali bio je to osmeh humornog čoveka. Sada moram da spavam, rekao je i onako obučen, legao na krevet i odmah zaspao. Sedela sam još neko vreme u fotelji i slušala kako sve dublje diše. Nebo je već bilo sasvim rumeno, promicao se novi dan. Ustala sam i prišla krevetu. Spavao je namršten, kao da ne zna šta će sa snovima. Sagla sam se i poljubila ga u čelo. Tada sam na komodi pored kreveta ugledala njegove stvari, novčanik, penkalo, beležnicu i džepni sat. Pružila sam ruku, uzela sat da ga pogledam, a Singer se tada okrenuo u snu ili je na sim sleteo golub, više se ne sećam, ali već sledećeg trenutka zatekla sam se izvan sobe u hodniku na stepeništu. Tek kada sam izašla iz hotela i primakla se gradskom trgu, shvatila sam da i dalje držim nešto u stisnutoj šaci. Zavukla je ruku u tašnu, izvadila starinski džepni sat i otvorila poklopac. Video sam ugraviran natpis, Dragom Isaku od Vande. Ko je Vanda, upitao sam. Ne znam, odgovorila je žena, i ne želim da znam. Godinu dana kasnije u Njujorkeru ili možda u Atlantiku videla sam priču o Hitleru. Neke stvari je izmenio, prebacio mesto zbivanja u Njujork, ali nije bilo sumnja, to je bila priča koju sam u te noći ispričala. S obzirom na to da je on uzeo moju priču, ja sam zadržala njegov sat. Pošteno, zar ne? Zveckanje pribora za jelo skrenuo nam je pažnju na stjuardese koje su gorile kolici između sedišta i delile ručak. Posle ručka objavio je glas preko zvučnika, gledat ćemo akcioni film i najnovije vesti. Žena je zatvorila poklopac i vratila sat u tašnu. Uplašio sam se da neće više progovoriti. Upitao sam, da li ste stvarno videli Hitlera u Čikagu? Žena me pogledala da nastavi da spušta svoj stočić. Na usnama mi se pojavi prepreden osmeh. Nekada davno shvatio sam i taj osmeh je mogao da bude dovoljan da je Singer pozove u svoju hotelsku sobu. Svako mora jednom da vidi Hitlera u svom životu, rekla je žena. Ne morate zbog toga da idete čak u Čikago.
Really, is it that bad? Thank you, David Al-Bahari, for that. And I was wondering, I haven't checked, I was lazy. Did Isaac Bashevis Singer actually write a story about Hitler in...
Yes, he has a story. Well, I must admit now, when I wrote this story, I did not check that story. So, but I think I remember a story that he wrote about a man who walks down the streets of New York and sees in one place a group of Nazi supporters, and he sees Hitler there. So I thought this would be an interesting way to add a story upon a story. And he also enjoyed writing stories that other people told him. So
Right.
I thought if I write one, he wouldn't mind.
It's a wonderful line when you say somewhere during the story, when I fly, I cannot read postmodernists. Their fragmentary structures irritate me, and the dislocated narrative strategies exacerbate my fear of flying. Classic prose forms like Singer's calm me, draw me into their semblance of reality, and help me forget where I really am. Is that your how do you say, your definition of the why you love Singer?
Yeah, that's what my books do to me when I read them on the planes. I'm a postmodern writer, so I always get sick when I read my own fiction, and so I prefer reading Singer. He was a beautiful storyteller. So you just take it and you read it for pleasure, for enjoyment, and because of the things you learn about life. But of course, one cannot write like Singer, because Singer, like Borges, is the writer you cannot imitate. You either write like a Singer or Borges. And if you do it, then everybody says, oh, it's been already done by Singer and Borges. So this was the only way to write like a Singer, to pretend that I'm writing one of his stories.
Yeah.
But reading postmodern literature is sometimes really, really complicated, even for me, who I think of myself as a postmodern writer. But I try to avoid fragmentary form now, because I write my novels in one long paragraph, in usually 130 to 150 pages. And as I always say, it's not true what some people say. And you can hear people say that Al-Bahari's computer does not have the enter button. That it doesn't work. So I can only begin, and then I cannot use the button anymore. The button is all right, it's there, but I just find it easier. It's actually there's nothing new under the sun. So that was what Jack Kerouac did with his novel On the Road, for example. He had a big roll of paper, and he would sit down, get drunk, and take all the pills that he...
Now that was a road movie of a novel, of course. You've written 30 novels, excuse me for my mistake, and in the meantime you keep insisting that actually the short story is more dear to you than the novel.
I believe that to write a short story you need really to to try to achieve some sort of perfection, because a good short story is a perfect short story. A good short story is a story that nothing can be added to or taken away from. I mean, if it's 4 pages, that's it. That's 4 pages, and it cannot be shorter or longer. Even the best novels have bad parts and bad chapters or wrongly written chapters that you can take away, and the novel will still be good. So I think that writing a short story simply is a more of a challenge to a writer.
I've been able to read some of your short stories. Right now I'm in the middle of reading the short novel Guts and Maya. Amazing experience. The short stories I've read until now are about travels and something goes wrong. This, how do you say, curious story about Hitler in Chicago, a story about Munich, which is in the city book of stories, where the plane suddenly has, instead of going to Frankfurt as you planned, you land in Munich and you end up in a nightmarish kind of world. Travels go wrong. Is there a tendency in you? Is there how do you say? Is there a theme about this traveling and the disadvantages it has?
Our whole life is one huge travel. I mean, we are on a sort of a trip. We are going to drive along that road like Easy Riders or whoever, and we'll always be interrupted by different things, by different people, and that's what I want to write about. Not about the people and the events, but about the changes that this change has produced in my mind, has created in my mind. So I'm interested in those little, sometimes very subtle changes that suddenly make a person. You know, one day your girlfriend comes to you and says, "I don't love you anymore," and that's one of the subtle changes. It doesn't sound very subtle, but I mean.
In your case, well, maybe that is a subtle change compared to the journey that is sometimes at the center of your work, the Holocaust. Guts and Maya is about another trip, but a very apocalyptical trip. The Jewish citizens of Belgrade placed in a airtight truck, gassed and dead on arrival. Is this trip with the not so subtle changes, is that always somewhere at the heart of your work?
It is at the heart of my work when I write novels that have something to do with Jews and the history, because the Holocaust is something that cannot be forgotten either by Jews or by anybody else. And when I decided to write the novel about the Guts and Maya, when I realized that it was actually, at first I thought that they sent a whole fleet of those trucks to do the killing, but later when I reread the historical sources, I realized that they sent only one truck, which was like sort of moving gas chamber. It was the second step in the history of the development of the killing as many people as possible with one shot, so to say. these unfortunate people were put into an airtight truck. They would close the door, and then they would start driving the truck. Then they would stop at one point, unscrew the how do you call this thing?
De uitlaat.
Yes.
In Dutch, yeah.
And connect it to the to the hole which led to the to the cabin of the truck. So these 100 people were slowly killed by the fumes coming from the gasoline that was used to drive the truck. And then I asked myself, if had those two people, those two Nazi soldiers survived the war, would they claim that they didn't know what they were doing? Would they say we were just, doing what somebody told us to do? They themselves killed 7,000 people. So it was, there was no doubt that they knew what they were doing.
This is about the novel Guts and Maya. It focuses on the two drivers, the two Nazi drivers, Guts and Maya. Extraordinary book. You can have it here, but to return to the short story then, with this, how do you say, with this experience always somewhere in the back of your mind, have you experienced that writing a short story can be peaceful?
I think this can be very peaceful, but I think of when I write short stories, I especially when I write those tiny, very short stories.
Just a few sentences.
Just a few sentences, sometimes only one. I always think of that they are sort of that they might help us realize something, that they might bring us to an enlightenment, like Zen koan, for example, can bring us to Satori, which I could always wanted to reach, but never succeeded. So I wrote one story in one sentence called Koan of a Story, which is very simple, but I'm still thinking about the story, although I wrote it. It has only one sentence, and it goes like this: if I raise my arm, where will my arm go? And if you think long enough about that, maybe you'll reach the enlightenment. But I haven't yet.
If I raise my arm, where will my arm go? David Abouhari, thank you very much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Short break.
Drinks, food, books, maps, writers are here. See you in about 20 minutes.